you seem pretty bold and brave with your I don't know, your Twitter. Like you enter into the gender ideology, the church of gender, if you will.
I do.
And that's a
Yeah,
scary place to be because the feedback you get there is pretty wild. And do you have kids or do you not have kids?
I do. I have 2 kids. They're both under the age of 2.
Okay, so that's why you're in there. I was like, there's usually it's
Well,
you're usually a parent.
yeah, yeah. It's and like so I have a background in Hollywood. Like I spent 10 years. I'm still there, but I'm in the Writers Guild of America, and I was quiet on my political beliefs just to play ball because, as you probably know, like Hollywood breeds a lot of insecurity, and if you speak out, you're like sacrificing your ability to get your next gig or whatever. But eventually, like it got to a point to where I was tracking this stuff with this gender indoctrination, and it got to a point to where I'm sitting back and I saw the logo that the abolitionists had on like a coin, and it had a picture of an African American man in chains, and he was like pleading, and it's around the coin. It said, "Am I not a friend and a brother?" And I thought to myself, like these people, abolitionists, like stood up. They believed in something bigger than themselves, and they went down in history fighting for what's right. And I saw what was happening to kids, and then I saw kids show up in my life, and I saw how innocent and malleable and just beautiful that they are. And I made a decision. I was like, you know what? Fuck it. I'm making a stand on this. Like people are going to know me for a couple things. They're going to know me for having curly hair, for being a crypto guy, and for this gender stuff. And like I put my money where my mouth is, and I talked to people on both sides. I was down in I was in downtown Atlanta in Pride Square holding a sign that said "No child is born in the wrong body," all during Pride, every Saturday during Pride Month. And I had a lot of great conversations with that. I got a lot of hate, but I got a shockingly amount of really good positive feedback. And the biggest takeaway I got, number one, was just the cowardice of people and how they just will not speak against this. They said, "I love what you're doing." I said, "Well, come here and stand with me for 5 minutes, talk to these people." And they said, "No, I can't do that." Like it literally takes 5 minutes out of your day, and you're not going to stand up for a 14-year-old girl being maimed for the rest of her life. You can't take 5 minutes out of your day to stand against that.
Mhm.
And then, secondly, this girl who was about 11 years old, she was there. I was out in front of a brunch spot, and she was there with her parents, and she was looking at my sign, and she came up and she talked to me, and she said, "Do you hate trans people?" And I said, "I'm standing on this corner because I'm trying to let kids just grow up." And she said, "Well, what's wrong with trans people?" I said, "There's nothing wrong with trans people, but just like you probably should not get a tattoo until you understand able to understand the gravity of that decision, you should not maim yourself. You shouldn't hurt yourself. If I saw you right now cutting your wrists, I would say you're hurting yourself. The same thing is happening to kids all around you." And I had to like square up with my beliefs and talk to this 12-year-old who was genuinely concerned about if I was like some type of like bigot on the street. I was just concerned, and I like, if you don't make a stand, like what do you stand for? If you stand for nothing, you'll fall for anything. So I kind of feel like I'm rambling right now just because this is like really close to my heart, not just because of like I'm trying to protect my son, and I'm sure you're familiar with what's happening with in California with AB 967, how they took away the parental rights. If you do
Mhm.
not affirm the gender identity of your child can be taken away. But it's also like if you go into the D-trans subreddit community, the pain and the anguish is just so palpable, and it's like there's no bottom. There's these 20-year-olds, there's these 18-year-olds, there's these 30-year-olds who are saying, "I made changes to my body when I was young," or "I just made changes to my body and I hate myself and I want to die." And all of this is fixable. Like all of this was avoidable
Mhm.
because there's manipulation happening to these kids. And
Mhm.
I don't like bullies. So yeah, it's there's been a cost to my professional career. I've lost friends over it, but when it comes to these conversations, like I really like what Billboard Chris is doing, and I'm a part of Gays Against Groomers. When it comes to these conversations, you have to really call out the evil, but then you have to be gracious to the people who are struggling with gender dysmorphia because it is a big time struggle that they're dealing with. And they need grace and they need support. But the people, the administrators, and the politicians who are using this for political gain, they deserve withering criticism, in my opinion.
Yeah, and then people also fail to recognize that it's now this emerging industry, right? Like the whole
Yeah.
transitioning of a child is worth
Yeah.
hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars. So follow the money always,
Hmm.
especially if you're trying to do like the integrity test. But it's interesting because it's like only one group of people is allowed to voice their opinion and their story and their quote truth,
Hmm.
but then when you listen to the detransitioners, they get shut down, like, no one gives them space to
Immediately.
talk, they try to attack their credit, their credibility, and then ironically, they'll attack their mental health, and they're like, "Oh,
Hmm.
well, they're crazy then," and it's like, "Well, you both had a mental disorder, one of you just approached it differently or came to, or it was, like, it's just different, right?" And it's interesting that they get dismissed so easily when they're suffering so immensely, and it is, as Abigail Shrier would say, irreversible
Hmm.
damage.
Yep. Yep.
So
I
I would
read that
say,
book. Yep.
yeah, listen to those people,
Yep.
right? It's like a cautionary tale, like, know the full scope of the situation. You can't just look at one side of the argument and say, "Okay, that's the capital T truth," and then there's this whole other part of the equation that you're consciously choosing to, like, put under the rug, and it's like, "Well, why are you doing that?" There's gotta be some kind of motivating factor there, and again, when it comes to, like, the age of consent and what California is doing, it's like first they moved the age of consent to for medical consent to 12, and then they passed that law, that 10-year gap law, so you could have a 12-year-old with a 22-year-old. That's fucking insane, and it was, like, Senator Scott Wiener, I wanna say is, like, the
Hmm.
person that, like, wrote and helped pass the bill, and if you just look at
He
his
did.
social media, that's a little bit concerning.
Yep.
But yeah, like, in that new did that bill pass, the one that said basically if you don't affirm your child's gender identity that you can lose them, or is that just being brought to the floor?
Oh no, it passed both the House and the Assembly. It is waiting for Gavin Newsom's signature, and he's pretty much going to sign it unless there's some type of act of God.
Mm. So then what do you do as a parent? You know what I mean? Unless you are completely bought and sold on the idea that your child knows best, which any parent that thinks that is insane. Like it's not to say that children aren't immensely intelligent and compassionate and that they don't
Hmm.
have knowledge that us as adults have either forgotten or don't know, right? Like I learn from my
Yep.
child on a daily basis.
Hmm.
That's different than me saying everything that he feels I need to validate. Like if it was up to
Hmm.
him, he would live off of birthday cake pops from Starbucks. Like that is the only thing
Hmm.
that he would eat. So I
Yep.
can't be like, "Well, that's how you feel." Or the other day he was saying, I don't know, like what did he want to pretend? I don't know. Kids pretend to be dinosaurs or they pretend to be dogs and they want to like, you're not. We can pretend to be this thing, but we're not this other thing. So yeah, unless you're like fully bought and sold on the idea that your kid knows best no matter what, do you leave California as a parent? Because all of those things that we had just mentioned, like medical consent
Hmm.
being 12, what if you have someone that's on the spectrum? Let's say you have a
Hmm.
12-year-old on the spectrum and a vast majority of children that have autism they're nonverbal, they might be super
Hmm.
violent, they might need a ton of medication, they might need to go to see a specialist. If all of a sudden they decide they don't want to do any of that because they are struggling, now and I saw a mom, and this was her actual story, she's trying to force medication on them, they can take the kid. So then she had to take her son and give the son to the father that lived in, the Midwest because they had different laws there, went back on the medication and the son was fine. So like what do you do? Do you leave? Because that's a huge gamble. It's like my kids aren't mine to take care of, they're the states. That's essentially what California is saying.
Yeah, and that is a straight up pull, direct quote from Marxists, from Marx. So, like, it is full blown Marxism when it comes to gender stuff and a bunch of other things in California. But look, if people make decisions on where they buy their house based on the school district, because you value your education for your children, if you value your ability to parent, you must move out of California. There's no way, because here's the thing: they're not going to stop. Okay. The
Mhm.
left, I would say, I won't even say the left, the progressives over the past 20 years have gotten all their policies enacted, especially when it comes to gender, by continuously gaslighting the public into here's how it goes. They make one little step, and then people on the right say, hey, this is a big deal. This could be a huge problem. We got to stop. And the left says, no, it's not a big deal. You're overreacting. You're blowing this out of proportion. And then a couple of months go by and they take another inch. Same reaction. No. Another inch. They have done that over the past 20 years to now where we're in this situation to where Anthony Weiner is literally going to take your kids, your son, and cut off his dick and pump him and basically make him a slave to pharmaceutical companies for the rest of his life. By the way, P.S. I believe it's 85 to 97% of boys who start testosterone in, I think, Tanner stage 2 or later cannot have an orgasm later in life. It is impossible for them to have an orgasm. And
As
that's without
testosterone or
surgery.
estrogen?
Estrogen. Yeah.
Estrogen,
Estrogen.
yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm,
I think it's both because you have to like cancel each other out, but it's mostly estrogen. If you go on hormone therapy, right? The
mhm,
reversible puberty blockers, the reversible hormones, none of that shit's fucking reversible. Okay.
mhm,
That's all just PR. If you do that
mhm.
to a boy, they cannot have an orgasm later in life. It's the same thing for women. I don't think the percentage is as high, but it's still well over 50%. So if you can't have that like spiritual connection with your partner, like what have you just signed that kid up for the rest of their lives? Let alone all of the reproductive problems, the fucking osteoporosis they get, early onset osteoporosis in their 20s when you start puberty blockers, because none of them are reversible. So if you're a parent and you're in California and you value your children or you're thinking about becoming a parent, you have to move to a state that has parental reality. It's
Mhm.
like that's just it. Like you can't. These blue cities are. It's going to be a wasteland. Like there's no other way to put it. So it's unfortunate, but yeah, if you're in California and you're a parent or you want to be a parent, you got to get out.
Yeah, it's we have, I still have some family out there, and we have some really close friends that live, in Southern California, and one of them was trying to get us to move there. 2 of them are basically butted up against each other, and then there's, like, a lot right next door, and they're like, "We could be our own little." I was like,
Hmm.
"Absolutely not. You are out of your mind. This is literally the last state I would ever move to." It's beautiful, the weather is beautiful, the scenery is beautiful, geography is like, the geographic nature of
Hmm.
California is beautiful, but, like, the policies and the people and the mindset and just, like, that collective energy is destructive, and there's no other way to put it, and it sucks. It
It
sucks, but I
does
feel like
suck.
it's too far gone, like, you can't have where do you even go? And then I mean, all of the policies, but even with, like, the homelessness issue, it's you can't go any where I used to live in California, you can't even go. The sidewalks are taken up. You're like, "This doesn't feel safe. This is not a place for anyone that is, like, a law-abiding, tax-paying citizen, like, you come last in this place." It's
Hmm.
crazy.
Yeah, it's kind of weird how California has devolved into this like Hunger Games, District 1, District 13 type of situation. It's I would say it's bizarre, but there's another famous quote by probably Mark Twain. Let's just go ahead and say it's Mark Twain. People get the government that they vote for. So people voted for this, you know?